This bulkhead piece right here, the reason the bumper on this isn't attached is this bulkhead piece won't fit there because it's actually for the front, and the front doesn't have one. So I ran out and bought these bulkheads. They're clearly marked front and rear. For whatever reason, the previous owner installed the front one in the back. It doesn't work. The bumper's loose, but now we have all the replacement parts we need to get after that. The front assembly is looking nice and clean, and that's ready to reinstall with the exception of the shocks, bumper mounts, and some minor things. So we'll be putting that back together. And then over here, there's like a lot of grease and dirt and oil and everything. The shocks are just as trashed in the back as they were in the front. You see like this, that's the kind of stuff that was in the transmission, which would bolt like right up here above the chassis pan. So all that grease that was in there kind of leaked down and trashed all that. The drive shafts are like pretty much stuck. They don't telescope like they should, so I got to take that apart and clean it up. I'm going to have a look inside the diff just to make sure that's good to go. Well, you guys already saw the front diff, so it's going to be kind of the same thing again. I might not get too like into filming that one. And besides that, the diff action on this actually feels pretty good. It's not too bad. Nowhere near as bad as the front was. But like I said, just kind of take it apart while we're in here, might as well. Making some real good progress now. The motor and the transmission, of course, are ready to drop in. The fuel tank's clean. And I guess the last big thing is figuring out the electronics for it. Once that's done, it's pretty much ready to rip. And there we go. We got all the screws out of here. I had to use a screw extractor on a couple of them. They were stuck and the heads were stripped. There's the ladder braces. And it's kind of interesting here. If you look at these screws, we got different lengths, different threads. I will say one thing about the previous owner. They did not lack confidence. Alright, so here we take this off. Lovely. Let's have a look on here. Just a little ladder brace piece. It's pretty heinous. Luckily, we don't have to clean that up because I have replacements for it. Now, the diff is looking to be in similar condition as the front one was. I want to get in here and make sure like all the bearings and stuff are good to go. And like I said, it doesn't feel as bad as the other one did, the front one. But this here in the rear is like, it's got a couple of little hang-ups in there. I can feel them. And like we talked about, you're better off to just kind of address it when you have the chance. We get the bumpers took off, shocks took off and everything, and basically get this assembly looking pretty much like that one. So you guys remember it had this busted tie rod end right here. So I got a couple tie rod ends, and we got a few tie rods in here too. So I'm just going to go through here and see if maybe there's a way to probably just put another tie rod end on there and maybe beef up the tie rods in the front. So far as the hinge pins go, I found good hinge pins for the bottom arms, but the top arms, I'm just going to check the straightness on the ones that it has and maybe pick some up if they bend or whatever. If they're straight, I'm just going to reuse them. The heads seem to be pretty good. So, like I said, if we need more, I got a lot of hinge pins too. Right on. Rear differential is out and laid out with the drive shafts. They're all getting cleaned up. So that's coming along pretty nicely. I was able to source a couple of tie rods for this rear end. And they're not as easily adjustable as the ones that came off, but they are significantly beefier. And I think they'll work pretty well. I checked the bearings on these out drives, and they feel fine. And like I said before, the actual diff itself feels okay. But I'm going to open it up anyway, just so we could put that 80K in there and kind of tighten up the diffs a little bit. The hinge pins ended up to be straight, so I left in the top ones, and then if I feel like it later, I'll probably throw in those titanium ones for the bottom. I don't know. And we still got the ladder braces to clean up, and just a nice clean up on everything else, and the rear assembly should be pretty much ready to put back together. So there we go. All the little tertiary stuff is scraped off and cleaned off as best I could get it. They had used this in mud, and some of this mud just dried on here like concrete. It's almost impossible to get it off, but we do our best and just make sure it doesn't interfere with anything. There's the rear diff. I have it opened up. These bearings here are real rough, so they're going to have to be serviced. And one of the case bearings over here, I think it was the one on the left, is just absolutely fried. So I'll try to service it, see if I can get that going. If not, it'll probably have to be replaced. But on the plus side, if you can kind of see down inside of here, this is in such better shape than we saw in the front diff, which is really strange. You know, like I said, the rear diff is going to take most of the punishment, and I don't know why the front one on this was so bad and the rear one was okay, unless at some point they rebuilt it. Every part of this truck seems like it's been gone through at some point. I'm seeing like mismatched screws and stuff, and the deeper I get into here, the more of that kind of stuff I keep seeing. But we're on the right track with this, so you already saw how to do the front one. This is the same differential, it's just flipped, so I'm just going to do the rest of this kind of offline, get it put back together, put the shock tower back on here, clean this stuff up, clean up the drive shafts, and it's going to be exactly the same way as it was when we did this one for the front assembly. Then mount the bumpers and everything, and we'll have a rear assembly. We can get onto the rest of the truck.
Now, if the assembly of the rear end goes as I'm anticipating it will, and I hope it will, to be perfectly honest, we'll get a result that looks an awful lot like the front assembly. So the front assembly has all your drivetrain components going into it, and over here we have basically all that same stuff, except it's for the flip end of the truck. The ladder braces are here too to attach everything to the chassis. I hit a little bit of a snag when it comes to this rear bumper, because the old verticals, like these chassis pieces here that you see right there where it would go into, the holes are a little bit too small, because on the 3.3, which is what these came off of, it used bigger screws, a fraction of a millimeter bigger than the ones would have been. They came on the 2.5 that these were originally a part of. So if you check it out, I came up with a way to like get around that. It's nothing too fancy, pretty cavemanish to be honest. All I'm doing now is just, I take this pin vise that holds a drill bit, just kind of get in here and ream those holes out. You can see the extra material coming out of there. Also, you can see how much flex that has without that mount installed, right? So that's a good indicator of how important it is to get this in here. After all, we can get it through there. So that'll go right into there. It already fits through here, so that'll mount up and work just fine. And we're not really losing any kind of strength or nothing like that. It was just a little bit of material that had to get cleared out. We got that all knocked out. The bumper mounts are on there. That's all reamed out, and that worked perfectly. The links here that we had trouble with before, because one was broken and the other one was looking bent. The end links were kind of messed up. Stuff like this where, man, that's an ugly screw. That's a bad example. We'll look at this one. Stuff like this where it doesn't really matter too much one way or another. It's not restricting our movement, and it works just fine. For the screws that actually matter on here, stuff that I feel like I'll be getting to later, you know, you got stuff like this. If you got to replace the servo or the servo saver, maybe get after that at some point. That probably not so much, but maybe I'll just throw another one on anyway. There's a few screws on here, and on the front assembly, which we completed prior, obviously, you've got some stuff on here like these with blown out heads on it. So I'm just kind of going through these screws here and replacing with hex where I see fit. The skid plates, the aluminum ones that I got for this, they come with screws, but they're Phillips, so we'll see what's up with it. She's coming together real nice. Everything's articulating really well so far as the moving parts are concerned. Serviced all the bearings that we had going on over here and got our diff oil. It's going to be a good setup. I am happy to say we're getting ready to talk electronics for this one. That's how close we are getting. So let's have a look here and see what we might want to use. I've got some boxed up stuff that I got relatively recently just in case the need came up for something. They're kind of high torque. Like, I got different ones. I don't know. I've never really used these before, but I will tell you, I've had good luck with these Traxxas 2075s. And especially for something like this, I think it'll do just fine. So everything's all laid out, and while we have the chassis out, I haven't had a chance to replace those screws yet because I was looking at this. I figured I'd kind of install these as we went. It just makes more sense that way. Let's go ahead and go with the 2075 like we was just talking about. It's here. I've got it already, and I like to think I keep all this crap for a reason. I sourced this other servo saver that I had laying around. I like these. I don't remember the manufacturer of them. The plastic's nice and hard. They're pretty durable. I've had good luck with them. Now we got a little bit of resistance in these right here. I was noticing. You could see I got them replaced with hex. So I'm just going to go ahead in here with the Zona oil and just a little dab. I got to do this kind of one-handed. So sorry if it's a little weird. And just work it around. Oh, that goes away instantly. So all of our resistance that was in here just goes away immediately. So far as this is concerned, I might have to ream these holes out a little bit in order to make the bolt fit through it right, and we'll just back it up with a washer and a nut to make sure it holds together, and that'll be nice and durable. Got our servo tester out over here just to test it out one last time before we install it. It'd be a shame to do all that work for no reason. So let's have a look here.
And we go on here, split the difference between the endpoints, somewhere in that area. And that'll be good enough to start. And the servo's a little bit jittery because it's a digital servo, and our servo tester's analog, but it'll still at least get us close to where we need to be, and we can fine tune it once it's installed in the truck and everything's getting closer to ready. So far as our throttle servo is concerned, because of course we're still going to need that, we have this right here. This Futaba 3003 servo is going to be pretty good for us to use. Let me move that, sorry. So we get that tested again right before we put it in and make sure it's centered, because I already swapped out the linkage onto it. Got these all laid out and ready to switch over. So I'm just going to kind of measure the distance, if I can look at it here, from that hole where the servo mounts up, just to that one right there. And this one, probably to like this one, would be about good. You got to ream it out a little bit with a reamer, and you'll be able to get through it. Or you can drill it with the pin vise, like we did a while ago with a hole that we had to enlarge. And even though this will look a little weird, mounted off center or whatever, it's all good. And on the plus side, if this hole blows out or whatever, you got other holes to mount it in. So this should work pretty well. Here's our front assembly, and our steering linkages are all put back together. You can see I swapped out for hex basically everywhere I could or where I wanted to on this. Some stuff like this right here that still looked good. Not really the easiest parts to source so far as what I have on hand, so I left it. The steering blocks were starting to feel a little fragile and the holes were blown out. So when I did this one, I used an elongated screw with washers and used a lock nut on the bottom. So that'll help add some strength to that, so that when we start running this, hopefully it doesn't break. There's not a lot of friction in the steering anymore, where before it was so difficult to articulate. It was definitely going to be rough on the servo. Speaking of the servo, we'll put that over there with the rear assembly. Speaking of the servo, I got them both dropped in so we can kind of like troubleshoot this electronics setup we got going on. And to do that, well, I sourced this radio system. It's not the most modern thing in the world. Threw some batteries in it, so that's working. And there's the receiver right there. I was smart enough to tape it to it. So now we have both these. And for whatever it's worth, this is definitely an upgrade from what it had whenever it was installed before, judging by the receiver that it had, because it was an AM receiver. So we're just going to use our battery pack here, plug it into this receiver. We got our radio on. Let's see where we're at. There's throttle. She's working. And steering. And check it out. That means we're in pretty good shape. I'm glad that worked. That's really cool, actually, that we were able to find a 2.4 gigahertz system that actually worked. What we're going to have trouble with is, if you look here, let me make sure you can see, we've got shorts in this wire. You can see them kind of all over the place, and they go all the way back into the battery box. So what I'm going to do is pull this out, clean this up. I'm probably going to keep running AA's in this just because, like, I just want this car to be a fun runner, basically. We got pretty much everything we need over here. All the tools, the soldering iron, some flux right there. I like this gel flux. It works real well. And there's our subject with that wire run we're going to have to fix. The soldering iron, I got to get the end tinned, and then it could use a new tip. I've kind of been putting it off, but I think this will work pretty well for us. We look in here and see that all we need to do is a little bit of CC on this one, like some corrosion control on the terminals. And I'm pretty sure this will work again. I have no reason to think it won't. Here's the switch. We know that that'll pass electricity because usually they don't fail. So I'm looking at this here now, and we have holes in the insulation here towards the switch, and then on the plug side we've also got a lot of issues with the wire insulation. See that? Just like that. So what I'm probably going to do is just cut it here to eliminate this stretch and solder this back to right there, and then cut it right here and either solder these back into the switch or just eliminate these right here and just kind of truncate that too. Whatever happens, I mean, you can see we've got a lot of wire here, so it'll still be more than long enough to make the run. There we go. Got some flux on there. Very nice. Alright. Now we're looking at this wire run here. We got nicks and dings from where we cut it off all over the place in here. This is about the last one. So you see that time we only took about 2 inches off there. So before we go too much farther on this, we got our heat shrink tube right here. I'm just going to cut a couple of short pieces. Stick on the wires here.
Now that we got that done, we'll just go ahead and probably cut this about right there, and then probably right about here. So that's all we'll lose that time. Then on our bare wire here, all we're going to do is strip, tin, solder these back together, and this will be hopefully good to go. Switch, we got that all soldered up, and that's looking good. Over here by the receiver, I got that plugged into the battery port, so we're just going to go ahead and trouble check the electronics. We got some fresh batteries in here. So on goes the transmitter, working. On goes the switch. And we even got the servo to be pretty close to 0 on here. So, right on. There it is, folks. All the assemblies. The chassis, the front and rear, engine, transmission, fuel tank. Pretty much everything's over here. Everything that we rebuilt, from the now forward-only transmission, the engine. These are screws that I went through when I was looking at the chassis screws that I took out, and I sourced all these, so it'll be all going back with hex hardware onto the chassis. So it's as simple as just bolting this up. We're going to get the ladder braces installed, this one and the one from the other side. And we have got, let's see here, we have got 2 aluminum skid plates. This one looks like, I believe it has hex hardware. And then this one has Phillips, so we can source some hex for that one. So right off the rip, I was trying to install the transmission, and the bolts run up through the ladder braces, through those notches there in the center part of the chassis, and then they go into these holes that you can see here, 8 of them on the bottom of the transmission. These holes, though, about half of them have no threads, and they're pulled out and stripped out to the point that the ladder braces just pull right out. I like to mix up a little bit of this Z-epoxy right here. It takes about 15 minutes to set up, so before that happens, and I just take this little guy right here and just wipe just a tiny little bit of that Z-epoxy into these holes, and it'll give the screws something to grab onto. So we just mix this up real good. This is one of the holes that was blown out, so we're just going to kind of just go like that and get a little bit on the inside where the threads are at. If you can see how that looks, it's just kind of like a blob off to one side, so that we don't end up having to replace perfectly good parts just because they got some stripped screw holes. Well, while our adhesive dries, this stuff is just all kind of sitting in the chassis loosely with that adhesive that we put in the blown out screw holes. The motor's in, and the gear lash, with the adjustability that this has, it's going to work. So that's very cool. We don't have to modify the slots for the engine mounting or anything like that. Let's take this. I've got this new fuel line right here. What I like to do is just, let's put this guy on here and put the fuel tank into place. Run this up into here, and then from the pipe over here to the pressure hole in the fuel tank. We'll mount up the fuel tank, and we'll have that done too. Steering linkage now got put back together, so that's all good to go. I was able to secure these into here. The braces, one of them's a little bit loose, so I got a little bit more work to do on that. There's our front skid plate, and I found all the countersunk hardware in order to install that. So the front and rear skid plate will both have the countersunk hardware. Check it. Pretty cool. We got everything mounted back in here. Of course, I was looking at how I'm going to put the throttle linkage back through here, and I realized I made a mistake on this. So I got to pull the fuel tank, pull the carb in order to get to how to adjust this, and lean it so the little ball link on here is facing forward, like down forward towards the front end of the chassis. We got this little ball link on here, rotated to the point where it's good to go. All we got to do is snap that little end link on there. I'll zero that out by turning on the radio system and then get these guys where they got to be. We're getting some pretty good actuation out of the throttle already, and the brakes are still working. This here, what you want to do is kind of like push that in there and get it tightened down so it has a little bit of like push to it, and that'll help reset your throttle. See, the T-Maxx, the original design was for a .15, and that has a rotary carb. The 2.5 and the 3.3 have a slide carb. So in order to accommodate that, they had to do this like cantilever setup right here that you see. If you've owned a T-Maxx before, you maybe find yourself messing with this all the time, because it is a little bit problematic, but they did what they had to do, and this one definitely feels a lot better since we rebuilt it.